I was going to say good morning, Ashok, because of the birds chirping.
The
Good
birds
evening.
chirping. Good evening, Muller, and how are we today?
Oh, I think we are good so far. Yes, good evening to you. And how's Singapore feeling today?
Very hot, actually. Very, very hot. But anyway, welcome. Last week we had Sham, and now you're back. So welcome back for our summary show for the month of May. And for all those who have logged in today, this welcome to Leadership in Flow Asia. For the month of May, the theme is still giving voices. And today we're going to be doing a summary of what all the three leaders spoke about. And we've been talking about bend structures for results. So for everyone new to the show, what is Leadership in Flow Asia? It is a show where we invite leaders every week. So really, we are learning from leadership every week. It's like reading a leadership book every week. So we invite them every week and we get insights and ideas from them about personal growth, leadership growth, and even business growth, right? And it's been a fun journey this year and a half. We're already coming to a year and a half with this show. And yes, so welcome everyone who's logged in, and welcome back, Muller.
Thank you. I love to watch you speak about Lifa so passionately. But I have to. Yeah, I know, Ashok. I know you love this, and you're absolutely right? Because we learn so much.
Absolutely.
So I think for me, it's the growth and the kind of leaders who influences through the show. Anyway, without
Absolutely.
further ado, so for those who've joined us, say hello to us on comments so that we can put up. We know who you are, and it'd be lovely to interact. But meanwhile, Ashok, let's go right into the show. So, what do we usually do in the last week, which is the summary, is that we try and connect the dots from our point of view as to what the speakers, what were the nuggets from the three speakers, and of course, this month it was giving voices, and we try and introduce some frameworks to help us to see the patterns that these leaders have so that our audiences can also connect with their patterns and hopefully get some ideas as to how they want to implement some of the leadership ideas they have. All right.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Malar. You said it so well. That's why I love the show. Yes, good evening, Gerald. Good evening, Gerald, and welcome. We haven't heard from you for so long. And yes, Gerald, keep the questions coming today because Malar said today she's in the mood to answer all sorts of questions. Anyway.
That was an evil laugh coming through for me.
I know, exactly, isn't it? Okay, so I'll get the ball rolling. So this month, the month of May, we had three leaders: Anima Kosai, Dr. Vicky, and Sarah Kelly. Yep. And it was very interesting to hear from all three of them. And I'll just share what struck me with all three of these leaders. All right. And yes, Maria Melanie, welcome to you too. Hi. So I'm going to start off with Anima Kosai. All right. She's a lawyer by training. Right. But she's got into a different space now where she's very focused on helping people get the courage to speak up. And she spoke a lot about the importance of psychological safety. But there's something that really hit me hard when she spoke about, that really stuck with me. She said it's about facilitating radical conversations. And she said it was important. We need to push the boundaries. We need to push it, whether it's from a business operational point of view, whether it's certain different types of points of view. It doesn't matter. But how do we now facilitate radical conversation? And she said, you know what? It's not natural for leaders to be able to do this, but it is so important. It's scary, it's challenging. And she said, it's not happening enough. We are not having discerning conversation, respectfully, of course, right? Because it's challenging, it's unsafe, but we're not having enough, and we should have more of that. And she went on to talk about the art of facilitating radical conversation. She said, what is important is you need to create a safe space for everyone. She's a big fan of psychological safety. So she spoke about that. And she said, it is important to get people's feelings out, not only their views, but their feelings. And that to me was a very important clue about conversations to transpire. It is not just about getting people viewpoint. Yes, we all have viewpoints, but how do we feel about it? What do we really want? And that is important. And she also spoke about setting ground rules when we are facilitating such conversation, you know, and and she says what is important is a facilitator or facilitators need to be the model and show what safety looks like. And something else she said very important, right? She said the facilitator needs to have the self-awareness, right? And this when she went on to say leaders need self-awareness, leaders need to keep working on themselves, right? And she says what holds leaders back is fear, right? So she talked about what is holding people back, but she said, you know what, we need to push the boundaries, we need to facilitate those radical conversations, because it is with those radical conversations that you build better relationships. And as we know, whether in an office environment or out of office environment, relationships matter. We're all in relationships, and the way we build the relationships are important, right, for all forms of growth and results, right? So I like that. I like that. And she did admit it's not easy, but it's important to do. And she even set certain ground rules of how to do it. I like that. So that was Anima.
Ashok, Ashok, let's take a pause because I know. So I thought, usually what we do is that we introduce all the three speakers and
Okay.
then we will introduce some framework. So I'm just thinking, might be easier for people who have joined us
Sure.
to, for us to segmentize it. So are you okay if I introduce the framework?
I love it. I love it. Then I can talk more.
Okay, lovely. But before we do that, I just want to tell you, Maria Melanie is our Mel.
Oh, right. Oh, Mel. Hi, Mel.
Yeah, because I saw that and Mel, he's your fan, so thank you for joining us. And you should listen to the summary he did about you, right? Okay, so that's our Mel, and yes, Gerald and Mel have joined us publicly. They have said they've joined us, but let's look at what is the framework. So today, I thought we'll explore the framework as to when we talk about motivation, right? So when we
Yes.
look at leaders,
Okay.
right? Our show is Leadership in Flow, right? And when we look at leaders, there are some leaders who just, especially the ones we meet in LIFA, we have the opportunity to meet through LIFA. Well, all of them have a particular way they think and
Mhm.
act that I think for us as hosts who listen to them, before the show and during the show, we learn a lot of stuff. But they sort of leave a footprint in our hearts, right?
Yes.
And there's a pattern of thinking with these leaders, right? And when we talk about flow, the idea of flow, what is flow? Flow is a state, and when you're in a flow state, you are at your best. And in leadership, we want leaders who are in flow state because we want the best out of leadership, right? So today, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share a framework for people who have joined us now and who may be listening or watching this a little bit later. Yeah. So if you think about flow, and we're going to connect what we saw of all our speakers and how these skills, these softer skills, these dimensions came together for them to be the leader they showed up as, right? The ones who made a difference, right? So we're going to Anima first, but before that, so if you look at Flow Profiler, and this is what we're talking about. In Flow Profiler, what we do is we measure emotional intelligence, which is the green, resilience, which is the purple, and motivation, which is the orange, right? Now, Having said that, now if you look at anima, right now, one thing that was common among all the three speakers, they're very self-motivated, right?
Okay.
Obviously, because that's how they lead and influence other people, right? Because I think one distinctive thing, very often we try and differentiate what does it mean to be a manager, what does it mean to be a leader. I think managers manage resources, and one of the resources they
Okay.
manage is the people, right? And when we think about leadership, I think for me, and I know I'm simplifying this, when we talk about leadership, we're talking about influence,
Okay. Okay.
the ability to get people to believe in your vision, in your dream, in your goals, and walk with you to achieve that, right? And so and that's a major difference, right? And at leadership, our hope is that when we talk about leaders, well, I cannot imagine a leader who's not purpose driven for the business, because I also believe that every business at the initial stage of its birth had a purpose. Every business, came into being because someone at some point of time knew they had a group of customers who had a need, and to serve that need, to serve that purpose, right? Now, throughout the conversation, if you look at our three speakers, what was common is they were all purposeful. They didn't talk about it, but the purpose was clear for them, right? In Anima's case, right, Anima was very interesting because, as you rightly put, she was about facilitating radical conversation, difficult conversations to put things in the right perspective, right? And that's how she created the Speak Up community. Now, is she purpose driven? Yes, right? Now, more than purpose driven, so she was purpose driven. Now, and if you look at her motivation, what drove her to do that? She was purpose driven for people to be for people to speak up. What she wanted them to do, speak up for yourself. Say your part. Tell people what's happening to you is not right, it's not fair, right? And that simply means that, she was promoting people to be autonomous, right? Now, she believed in it. But then what was amazing about her is that these things are nice to talk about, right? You talk about human rights people, you talk about, people who are advocates for a purpose. It is easy for us to say, hey, I believe in this. I think this is how a better world would look like, sound like. But very often, I don't know whether you've have ever had that experience. It's very nice to be purposeful, but it's not so easy to facilitate for the purpose to take a life of its own, take action towards it. So Anima clearly at any point of time she wants people to speak up because she wants people to be autonomous, right? And so she's purpose driven. And now, why is she purpose driven? Because she truly cares for a group of people whom she believes are victimized, right? Now, why are they victimized? Either because they don't have psychological safety or they don't know their rights. So, what she's doing in this circle, she is facilitating these conversations,
Mhm.
right? She is helping people understand what their rights are while respecting their fears, while showing compassionate for the difficulties that they are having, which is why you'll find that in the EQ quadrant, we call this regard for others.
Okay.
She cares for people. So at the base, right, when we think about leaders, can you imagine two sets of leaders, Ashok? A group of leaders who truly care for people, and another group of leaders who say they care but don't quite care,
Okay.
right? Can you imagine the impact in the choices, in the decision that they make when they truly care and when they don't care, right? All right.
Mhm.
Now, and when we talk about caring for people, leading people, influencing people for a purpose, these people also safeguarded people. They had the courage to do what is not easy, what is not popular, what can be very difficult, right? So, of course, in Anima's case, she was very driven by the fact that she didn't want people to feel victimized. So, what was Anima
Sure.
trying to do, right? She was purposeful. She wanted people to be independent in the way they acted because she cared, which is regard for others. Now she combined all of this so that by creating the space to speak up, she wanted people to acquire a skill of assertiveness. Take a stand, do your part, look after yourself, speak
Hmm.
up for yourself, and get the justice, the fairness that you seek in your life. That's what she did. So,
Sure.
what I thought was really interesting is that she was really helping individuals who were less resilient in a particular area
Okay.
to find their resilience. But how did she do that? She did it by caring for them, by creating a space where there's care. That's how she brought about, and being very purpose driven in whatever she was doing. So I wanted to share that,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay, I've got a couple of comments and questions on this, right? Number one, this flow, I know you have introduced this to me, and I think during the show many a times. And I still remember this stems from the research by the Hungarian psychologist, right? Mikhail
Professor
Csikszentmihalyi. Yeah.
Mihai
So I,
yeah.
yeah. So I know it stems from there, but what I like about that is when I had come across this research many years back, it is about finding the optimal performance. Is what you have coined, right?
Mm,
On how you perform with with your skills. That means
mm,
being able to take on something difficult, but not too difficult that puts you off. Yeah,
mm,
and also have the ability, because ability and your motivation is also important. And I like the fact that here in the dimensions you've gone even deeper to identify under motivation. It's just not motivation, but what really are the important dimensions of motivation that one can think about to improve on, to work on, right? So I like that, and I like the fact that you have put a clear distinction for all our viewers and even for myself, right, in the context of today's show, where you said manager manages resources and leaders are there to influence. And I think that's a good distinction as we carry on this conversation, right? And one thing about leaders, I must say, I do agree with you, is how much do they care for others, the regard for others? Yes, in my own terminology, I've had, I see leaders as either they are transactional or transformational,
wow.
right? Right? Or I see, and I think bottom line for my various conversations, my observations, it all boils down to how a leader sees another human being. Do I see you as a digit, a head count, or a human, a heart count? Because with that, what shifts is the way I treat you, right?
Mm,
How I treat you, right? And under pressure, in good times, I could treat you differently. Under pressure, my real characteristics come up, you know? So I can imagine Anima, right? When she conducts radical conversation, it's not an easy thing.
mm,
It's almost under pressure, right? And yet she stays her ground, like what you said. She's got the regard for others. She is very purposeful in the way she wants to create that autonomy for others, you know.
mm,
And yes, it's important to be resilient, but it's also about the assertiveness in that area. So
mm.
thank you for sharing about uh, Anima and in this model. Now I've got a question here from Sherry, right?
Mm.
Sherry asks a question, and I think it's for you. What's the
For
difference
us,
between what's the difference between mental fatigue and resilience?
I was glad you were saying doing all the talking because I was thinking, Sherry, thank you for the question. Sherry always has very good question. I'm going to
That's
try and tell you on top of my head
okay.
what
So
I
just to let
think.
you know before you answer the question, what I think about it, huh? Just to give you a bit of context about Sherry.
Absolutely.
I do know her a little bit, actually
Mm,
quite a bit. She's
mm,
Dr. Sherry. She's got a PhD in engineering. you know.
Oh,
And she is logged in all the way from Adelaide. So it's like 2.5, 3 hours away from that. Yep.
right.
So thank you very much, Sherry, for logging in. She's a big fan of you, Mala, just FYI. All right. So now you can answer the question.
Okay, now more pressure to answer the question better, right? Sherry, thank you for the question. So mental fatigue, right? So I think if we look at ourselves as a human, right, as a person, we have the mental, your brain capacity or the mental capacity, our intellectual self, our emotional self, our physical self, and our spiritual self. Okay, right? So if you look at mental fatigue, we are looking at the work that happens in the brain. Now, when do we get tired? Fatigue is tired, right? Uh, Sherry has also said toughness. So I'm going to use the fatigue first and I'm going to look at toughness a little bit differently, right? Now, so when we talk about fatigue, when do we get fatigue? When do you feel fatigue, Ashok?
It can be either under stress, when I have maybe I'm physically tired after exercise, right? When I'm in a stressful situation, whether with relationships or sometimes it could be about the intensity of reading. So it all depends. Yeah,
Fatigue, right? So if
yeah.
you take physical fatigue, when do we experience physical fatigue? Either we have overused parts of our muscles or body.
Okay.
When you overdo something, when you
Mhm.
overuse, you become physically tired.
Mm.
Or you haven't rested,
Okay.
right? Would you agree with me? Right? So physically, when are we tired? Sometimes you overwork yourself, you go to bed, the next morning you wake up tired because you're experiencing fatigue because you've not had enough rest or you've overworked yourself. So I want to bring the same thoughts into mental fatigue. When do we feel mentally tired? When we have overused our thinking, right? We overthink, we ruminate, we think about the same thing over and over again. We're not able to sleep, right? That's where mental fatigue happens, right? So that's how I would look at mental fatigue if I needed to explain. I also want to, I like Sherry, she's put on mental toughness. I'm a little bit careful when it comes to the word toughness, just like resilience, right? Because one of those, I think we rally behind being strong, being tough. Now, when usually I'm using layperson term as to how do we usually talk about toughness. We say, oh, you know what, Ashok was tough. Why? Because people hit him and he didn't fall or didn't cry. All right. So I think the context is really, really important. And personally, and this is really my personal opinion, I think there's enough evidence to say that now what looks like tough on the outside, strong on the outside, if it leaves wounds on the inside, it is not useful, right? So when it comes to mental toughness, I really do think it is about the agility, the ability for us to be able to think in different ways, be open and have a growth mindset is what I would say mental toughness is for me. I'm not referring to any particular. Yeah. Now, why? Because for us to be tough, right, when things work, we must be able, if you're tough physically again, right, you would be able to carry loads that is heavier than what is expected of you, right? If you see a small frame person, right, and they carry something really heavy, we say, oh, you're physically tough. Mental toughness is when you are able to process stuff that's a bit more complex, I think, a lot more difficult than is expected of you, right? So that's what I would categorize as mental toughness, right? Having said that, Sherry, I love the question. What is the difference between that and resilience? So, what is resilience? Resilience is our ability, all right, to navigate through when things go wrong. Resilience is the result of adversity. So, whenever we experience adversity, two things happen, right? Life is not going on the way I want to. I mean, COVID is a very good example, right? things didn't work out the way we wanted, right? So that's an adversity. So when adversity hits, this is where how we think becomes very important, because when adversity hits, there are two mindsets. One is I'm helpless, I have no hope. Another one is I don't know what to do, but I'm going to figure out how to. Now, the moment you say you're going to figure out how to, what happens is that you know that your normal structure of thinking and living is not going to work. That's why it's an adverse situation, which means now you need to either navigate through whatever you know now and acquire and be open to new knowledge and say, I am willing to try whatever I have not tried before. I don't know whether I'm going to be successful, but I'm going to navigate my way through because I am still full of hope. So resilience doesn't mean that I will win, doesn't mean I will be typically successful, but resilience means that I'm going to figure out a way to first survive and then thrive.
Thank you. Wow, there's a lot to take that in. So, if what I'm hearing is this, fatigue is okay. So you used a muscle as a metaphor in
Mm.
that sense, right? So it's a
Right.
mental muscle. So fatigue is when we overuse that muscle.
Mhm.
Toughness is the ability to
Sorry,
reframe
we
our
overuse or we don't rest.
or don't rest. Okay, overuse or don't rest. And toughness is the ability to reframe the thinking to use it correctly.
Mhm.
And resilience, right, is the ability to navigate to find navigate adversity to find new solutions.
Yeah, I think for me, I have to repeat my mental toughness. So at
Okay.
this moment, and Sherry, really, this is now I'm thinking about it as you throw me the question. I think toughness is being able to carry a load heavier than your normal ability.
Ah, that's
I,
nice.
and I'm taking that just based on how we say she is tough, he is tough, right?
Got it.
Because we don't think that person can or should handle that amount of load.
Mm,
And the
mm,
load could be a decision that you need to make. The
yeah.
load can be an action you need to take. A load can be the emotional turmoil that you are experiencing, a difficult emotion that you're experiencing, right? That makes you tough. So, can you imagine, someone who loses someone they love, right? And they are able to bounce back very quickly to a normal life. You say, oh, you're strong, you're tough because you bounced back quickly. Now, it doesn't mean they feel any lesser pain, right? But they're able to get on with life despite the difficulty, and that creates toughness for me.
Nice, nice. Wow. You know what? You have given us a lot to think about, and I really like the fact that you mentioned about resilience. I think there might be some misconception out there. Resilience means automatically you be successful, you get the results you want. But I think you put it down uh, correctly. Moderating
Mhm.
expectation. Resilience is really the ability to think differently, put things into action, to see progress, not necessarily meet those success factors, but it's actually taking those results to experience things differently instead of staying in that safe zone or in that zone that you are in all the time. So I think that's a very good context. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much for that.
Thank
I have another question, but this is not for this today's show, because I know you earlier on said all companies when they first started off, they had a purpose. You were using a lot of past tense, like as if they've forgotten about it. But we'll
Mm,
take that discussion again, maybe at the end of the show or maybe another show. But
okay,
let's get on to Dr. Vicky,
nice.
right? Okay, so Dr. Vicky, for those, I think he has a lot of fans out there.
Yeah.
He has a lot of fans out there. And I think Sherry is also one friend. She's asked another question, but before she asks the question, let's talk about Dr. Vicky, because I think her question would be also related
Yeah.
to Dr. Vicky, right? So Dr. Vicky, yes, is a medical doctor. He's working with Fresenius Medical Care. They focus a lot on dialysis, providing dialysis, right? Now, what was his purpose? Like what you've just said here, regard for others. What was his purpose? Access to healthcare. And he
mm,
gave a lot of examples, and he even spoke about from the technology point of view, from the AI point of view, how they are actually gathering the data to be able to nudge behaviors
mm,
for the patients. And
mm,
he's looking at the patient care from a holistic point of view, not only the patient, but the environment, the community, and even the staff. And
mm,
something about the staff when he spoke about that caught me was about situational or adaptive leadership. What do I
mm,
mean by that? He said, yes, from the top down at the company level, they make certain decisions on certain policies and they roll out these practice for everyone. But he says, you know what? When I go to see my nurses in the cities and in the rural areas, right, it's different. The
mm,
demographics are different on the ground.
mm,
Specific challenges are different. So he
mm,
said, I need to be more situational. I cannot impose one practice across the board from everyone. So he went
mm,
out on the ground, he heard the ground problems, he even solicited their solutions, right?
mm,
And he gave them the voice. And he said, you know, I want to hear from you. I want you to tell me what are the problems. I want you to tell me what will work better. What is the practice that you think that will work better? And let me champion that for you at the management level. So
mm,
yes, he was focusing on the autonomy, like what you mentioned, right, to help in the growth and build a relationship, right.
mm,
And so that's what caught me about Dr. Vicky. Of course, he had his stories about one of the patients who passed away, where he really then started focusing on what else he can do. But I think this situational leadership mindset and encouraging everyone to speak up, because some of his nurses turned around and told him, all these years we've never had this ability. Nobody gave us this ability. But he says that the people on the ground know better, that solutions that they provided were better.
mm,
And that's
mm,
what took, you know. And he said he also noticed something again. People do have the fear to be a leader. All right. So that's for Dr. Vicky, right? So you may want to share with us
yeah.
in this flow, right? And then we will dive into Sherry's Kristen.
All right. Now,
Mhm.
so Dr. Vicky, I mean, I know a couple of people reached out to us because they were so inspired by the, the kind of ideas he implemented. He really, I will say, bended structures, and in this case, I will say, the results were equivalent to the purpose of his business, which is really, for people to have better quality life. And what is better quality life for them, right? People who go through dialysis, right? He wanted them to complete the dialysis, and he wanted them to follow what is required of them, so that uh, despite being in dialysis, they can lead as normal a life as they can. So for me, that's a very clear, deep purpose, right? And Dr. Vicky was very interesting. So if you look at Dr. Vicky, his purpose was very clear. He wanted people to be autonomous again. He wanted them to have their life back. But if you look at the green, which is the EQ, right? Now his
Yep.
regards for others was high, so he was very clear. In this case, he was clearly serving his customers, and the customers he's serving are his patients, right? Now he draw into a lot of his what we call social awareness. Now why? Because he wanted to know why patients were not turning up. He wanted to know what were the challenges the patients were having. He wanted to understand the challenges the nurses were having, why they were not as excited about incorporating AI into their work. He was very curious. So he was pulling all of these resources in terms of social awareness. Now, why? Because he then used all of this information, if you realize, for collaboration, the orange.
Hmm.
He realized that people need to collaborate
Yes.
for the patient to have optimal success in their healing, right? And so what did he do? He pulled in the nurses. He, gave back time back to them by introducing AI. He helped them understand what is the objective, What is the purpose of their role, which is patient care? To a point, if you remember the story that was really inspiring is the story of the nurses who would actually, if some of their patients had difficulty, they will even find a way to go and pick up the patients, right? So he drove the purpose so well, and he drove collaboration so well that everyone was engaged, was very clear that at the end of the day, the patient's interest was of utmost importance, right? Very, very selfless, a lot of thinking that went into it, a lot of clarity that actually went into it. And he persevered. Like it didn't happen overnight. He continued to have different conversation at different levels. He brought different people together to have the conversation for the same purpose. I think that's why his story was very inspiring.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, thank you for that roundup. So that dovetails down to Sherry's question again. So he had to help people build their resilience, like what you mentioned, right? So what strategies can one adopt to build resilience? So let's look at it from a personal point of view. If you've got personal example, and if it is for team leader, what can they do for a team? But let's look at personal first, right?
Mm.
What strategies can one can one put in to build personal resilience?
All right. So there was a study. This is my most favorite study by Dr. Karen Ravitch, right?
Karen Ravitch.
Ravitch, right? And yeah, so you can look up her book. This is the book I would say that totally gave me clarity about what resilience is. So she
Okay,
did a
what's the
study.
title of
She
the
looked
book?
resilience
Resilience Factor.
factor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, by Dr. Karen Ravitch. KarenReivich. Okay. Now, I stumbled upon her book now, and in her book, right, she talks about, we talk about resilience, right? And they looked at people from different parts of the world, different levels of life, right? And she tracked resilience. What do you think was the number one roadblock to people becoming resilient or overcoming an adversity? Take a good guess.
Okay, so if
Number one
I'm
road.
to if I'm to
Mm,
guess without looking at the book, not that I've looked at the book, I think it
mm,
could be uh, your self-limiting thoughts.
exactly. More than self-limiting thoughts. I mean, so it's the way we think. So, the difference between a person who is resilient and not is the way they think. So, if you want to become resilient, the first thing that you need to do is to be open to new ways of thinking. I can't remember, where who is the person who quoted this, but I love this. Right, you cannot resolve a problem at the level it was created. Right? So when we have an adversity, we call it a problem or a challenge. It was created at a particular level, right? If you're not able to resolve it because the answers are not where it is at a higher level or a different space, right? Which means that with your current thinking, you won't be able to resolve it. That's why you have the problem. The problem is the result of your current thinking not being useful, right? So that's the number one. So whenever we talk about resilience, so if you can look in your own life, right, how people deal with issues. Some people will look at a problem and say, okay, I've got a problem, life is not fair to me, right?
Hmm.
And they're right, they're not wrong, they're right. I lost my job during COVID. Life is not fair, COVID is not fair. You're right. But then you have another group of people. Think about the inspiring stories we had. Like in Malaysia, we had pilots who were not flying anymore, who were opening up nasi lemak stalls, right?
Hmm.
Now, that's being resilient because I know I'm a pilot. I know I can't fly now. I can actually say it's not fair And you're right, it's not fair. But what this person did was, right, he opened up a nasi lemak stall. Now, what does that mean? That simply means that, I'm going to do something else because I'm thinking differently.
Mm.
Can you say that? Now, as I say that, hi, Anima has said hi. Thank you, Anima, for saying hello to us. She said she's going to say hi and she's going to watch this later. Okay, so when we talk about resilience, right, your main strategy is your current way of thinking is not working. Am I willing to explore other ways of thinking that I don't know? It could be a new it could be a way of thinking that I don't agree. Am I
Mm.
willing to
Mm.
unstuck myself from my belief? Right? Oh my gosh, Vicky is here. Hi, Dr. Vicky. We just
Hello,
finished
Dr. Vicky.
about
Yeah, we
yes,
just finished talking bad about bad about you. No, actually, it's good. All great.
yeah, you have a
Yes.
lot of fans after your show, Vicky. Yeah. So when we think about resilience, so that was the number one thing that came out in her research. Over and over again, you'll find that in the work of resilience, right, it's the ability to think differently. And because we were talking about Dr. Vicky, right? Now, if Dr. Vicky said, "Oh, look here, the patients are not turning up," it's not his problem actually,
Mm.
right? It's not his problem. His focus is supposed to provide patient care when they come
That's
in
right.
for dialysis. This is why in Malaysia, Vicky will call kepochi, busybody, right? Now, what he did, he knew that the success factor will be if patients came. So he took every other pushback that came from patients not turning up or
Mhm.
not following through their treatment, whether it was nurses, whether it was environment, whether it was family. He took all of these factors and thought about it differently.
Sure.
I don't know whether it was during the show or the pre-show. He even went to the point of saying how comfortable the chair is, right? Now, why? Right? Because he realized that sitting there for 4 hours, it's not easy, right? And how do we it's already difficult to go through a dialysis. How can I make it better? How can
Yep.
I take away all of this pushback is what Dr. Vicky was all about. He's saying, yeah, sometimes being busybody helps
Helps.
within limits, of course. All right, we call it regard for others, Dr. Vicky.
Sure.
We need to be more busybody in a way that's useful for the community,
Sure.
right? Otherwise, sorry, what happens is that we become the transactional leaders.
Mm.
Transactional leaders will then get transactional employees who tick the box and say, I clocked in, I clocked out, I ticked my box for what you wanted me to do, and not go to the bottom of the issue and do what is required.
Oh, thank you again, Malar, for that. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about Sarah, but before that, I just want to say I noticed something very interesting. The moment you
Mm,
mentioned Nasi Lama, Anima
mm,
left, right? I think she went to have her Nasi Lama, and then Dr. Vicky came on. So I think food is an important component here. Right? Okay, I'm going to have a follow-up question for what Sherry had asked. But
mhm,
let me dive into Sarah because I'm seeing a
mhm,
pattern here, and I want to
mhm,
relate it back to Sherry's questions about strategies to adopt to build resilience. Yep. So okay, so Sarah Kelly, HR practitioner, again accidental HR. Why I say accidental? We have already had a few leaders who have come from our show. We realized they never wanted to be HR. They had different careers and they've switched over to HR, and they are loving it.
mm,
Now, one thing interesting about Sarah, for me, what I found interesting was she she doesn't shy away from conflict resolutions, almost like Anima, right?
mm,
She does not shy away, and where that stems from is where her father used to tell her, never accept anything that has been told. Be
mm,
uh, be be willing to debate issues. And she said conflict is not a bad thing, and
mm,
her motivation of conflict resolutions was really to understand the people and where they were coming from,
mm,
because she kept asking herself, how can I now mediate to negotiate to find common grounds,
mm,
right?
mm,
And she said that in this journey, you needed to learn how to manage your own emotions.
Mm.
Right? So that came up big for me. Of course, she was also a co-author in a book, right, where she was helping women with financial intelligence, financial literacy, right? We spoke about that. But what really caught me was her focus, her view about conflict resolution, and
Mm.
how she continuously keeps learning to build that skill.
Nice,
Yep.
nice. I think Sarah was very interesting because if you look at Sarah, because it was the project that she worked for International Women's Day, right? So
That's right.
if you look at Sarah, right, I think her journey is interesting, right? Because she gets into HR by accident now, and this is where I think sometimes leaders are different, right? You can either say I want to do what I learned, or use what I learned to make a difference to where I am,
Mm.
right? And what Sarah did, if you look at her pattern, is that she wants people to be independent, to be autonomous. So her purpose is very clear, right?
Yep. Yep.
So even if you talk about how she looks at financial literacy, why is financial literacy important, especially for women, right? She realized that women, being in the workforce, I mean, we're still new in the workforce. Money is still new. Financial independence is still new. We don't know. We don't have enough experience making the right choices. So what does she do? She wants to empower them, right? She wants them to have the autonomy to know, how do I use my money? How do I
Mm.
invest my money, right? So she spends her time educating people in spaces, in this case, women, right? She wanted to educate them, she wanted to empower them with knowledge so that they then can have autonomy where finances are concerned,
Sure.
right? Now, why did she do that? Because she cared. She really cared for people. She looked at what women were struggling with and she came up with a solution in the way she knows,
Mm.
using her talent, her knowledge, and her skill at the right time, right? I think that's what Sarah was fantastic at, right? So if you look at Sarah's EQ, right,
Mhm.
she is very very much aware of what people need, which is social awareness and regard truly caring for people. And she obviously based on purpose, and she actually wanted people to grow, to think, right, to understand so that they then
Mhm.
can make their own choices,
Sure.
right? Yeah. And how does conflict resolution come in? So if you look at her uh, her boldness and courage to face conflict, right? Where does that come from? Again, right? She cares for people, so she
Yes.
wants to manage conflict because she wants to keep the relationship.
Hmm.
A lot of people who avoid conflict think that they're trying to save the relationship, but a lot of times when we avoid conflict, we exist in relationship. We don't have a relationship,
Wow. Okay.
right? um, it's really what we call false harmony, right? We live in false harmony, keeping the conflict within. Whereas what she did is she was navigating her way, figuring out a way to find out how can we have a win-win so that we now can continue to have a good relationship and make it work. So
Wow.
that's what I thought.
False harmony.
Yeah, false harmony.
Wow. That's powerful, man. False harmony. Well, I'm living this. I'm living this. No. Okay.
Yeah,
So what?
but, Ashu, let me ask you this. Now,
Not
has
yet.
there been has there been a time
Mm.
when you had a conflict that you did not address with someone you care
Yep. Yep.
because you wanted to keep the relationship?
Yep. Yep. I want to keep the peace, keep the relationship. Yes. 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 Definite. Yep.
But were you really engaged in that relationship when the
No.
conflict
No.
was
No. No. No.
affected?
Yeah. No, which then dovetail again back to Sherry's question, because what I'm noticing now, I'm seeing a pattern already, right?
Mm-hmm.
All our leaders, wonderful leaders, from Anima, Dr. Vicky to Sarah, they
Mm-hmm.
all had a regard for others. They had great social awareness, right? They had clear clarity of purpose. They were focused on giving autonomy and being autonomous because they have experienced it, like Dr. Vicky had said. They also focus a lot on resilience, whether it's giving or being resilient. Now, one thing that you mentioned earlier is that the difference being between resilience and not being resilience is the way you think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is where the problem is. There's a lot of times we focus on these skills about being resilient and all, but when you say the way we think, we have to go a bit deeper. And this is where I think our leaders who came on our show had gone deeper, consciously or subconsciously. They have gone deeper because they have greater clarity or emotional awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you
Mm-hmm.
sit, it's the way we think. Yes, I my thinking affects whether I'm resilient or not. But where did that thinking come from? What are the emotions tied to that thinking? Is this something that I mean, personally, I feel that if I had a magic wand, I love you to be around the whole globe, right? Teaching everyone the ability to understand their emotions so that they can know who they are. Like what Nima said, people have got to work on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the impression I got from Dr. Vicky. He had the good fortune of having great leaders who helped him along the way. At the same time, he also was introspective about going deeper to understand himself. Because he had empathy about what worked for him, he knew how to give that empathy also. So there was that emotional level of awareness, intelligence, a deeper level, I feel. Again, consciously or unconsciously, right? Uh, and I think this is something that I think if every one of us went a bit deeper to understand our emotional emotions,
Mm-hmm.
it will help us build our resilience, our motivation, social intelligence. That's my view. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm the emotion queen, right? But
I know that's why I had
yeah,
to throw that
I
to
think
you.
two things that comes to my mind. One is I think we've had this discussion a couple of times. I think people like Anima and a few other leaders have only affirmed it. People like Dr. Vicky may not say it, but you can see them living it, right? They are
Exactly.
self-awareness. Yes, so I won't use the word emotional awareness, but I will use the word self-awareness.
Self-awareness, yes.
They are aware of. They're very clear about who they are and who they are not.
Mm,
Right? A lot of times when we talk about awareness, we only say, "I want to know who am I at my core," right? But who am I includes knowing who you're not, right? So Dr. Vicky comes across like a person who will not take no and problems as as a stumbling block, right? Anima will not take any form of bullying of the humankind, any form of the less advantaged people. And Sarah comes across like a person who will not tolerate not being disempowered, especially for women, right? So
yeah.
they know who they are, they also know who they are not, right? So, and if you realize all our leaders that who come on our show, not only they have high self-awareness, but they are always reflecting and growing from their reflection.
Yes. Absolutely right. And I think this is a very important experience for leaders to have, right? Even more so in this current day and age of our business environment that we are in, right?
Mm,
Now, how to me earlier on you had differentiated managers and leaders,
mm,
but I also feel that these managers, right, could
mm,
have this level of self-awareness.
mhm.
So what can organizations do to replicate this or help develop this for managers also and even leaders, apart from calling you?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's number one option, right? That's the top of the list.
Sure, sure. But before that, I want to, and I think they are tight because we only have 5 minutes, right?
Yep.
I think we have undermined the
Undermine.
role and the power of emotions in optimal performance in life. So
Yes.
what we have done over the years smartly is that we have abnormalized emotions. So I don't know whether you've heard this, right? I've heard, when I first got into learning and development, I've heard managers who will say, leave your problems outside, leave your emotions outside before you come to work. Don't
Yes.
bring
That's right.
your
Mhm.
personal issues back home, right? But the same leaders never told, don't take your work problems home either. So there was always a double standard in that sense.
Mm.
So number one is I think we are transitioning from thinking, believing, acting, making choices, decision, and even policies that uh, that that treated people as if they were AIs.
Mm.
I want your intelligence, but not your emotions for a couple of reasons. Uh, I mean, it's evolution. Number one, we didn't know better. Number two
Sure.
is I think a lot of times for leaders, one of the greatest strength of all of these leaders when we say they are courageous is because they're willing to face difficult emotions from people because they have faced their own difficult emotions themselves, right? Because if I'm not able to deal with my own difficulty, how am I then going to manage conflict resolution? How am I going to tell people to speak up despite the difficulty? How am I going to tell family members, hey, you need to support your family member who needs your support for this dialysis? How am I going to be the busybody, right?
Right.
To make the world a better place because that needs courage. And courage is an emotion. Ca-
Yes.
That so an emotion equals to energy, right? So a lot of times I think the other misunderstood thing is that emotions are so if you think about emotions, emotions are just energy. So what energy do you want to bring into life? The energy that you want to bring into life is the energy you need to invest in, right? We want people who are committed, we want people who are passionate. Are they not emotions? But we don't want people to be frustrated, we don't
But
want
that's
people
also,
to be
but that's
complacent.
also an emotion, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine, I've heard stories, right, where you don't get your promotion, right? And when you then don't get your promotion, your boss tells you don't be disappointed, be professional,
Hmm.
right? I am emotional because I cared for this job. I gave my best shot. And disappointment is just a normal human expression of what this job meant to me. But we don't allow this, right? So think about psychological safety, right? Why is psychological safety such a big issue now? Because people never feel safe to say what they feel.
Right.
It's not what I think. I need to process my feeling so that I come across professional. And coming across professional means neutral. Neutral means what? I don't care enough about something. Anima isn't neutral. Sarah isn't neutral. Dr. Vicky is not neutral.
Nice.
They were all biased towards a better world and they were willing to
Nice.
bend structures to get people to where they needed to because they believed in the purpose. And that was emotion.
Thank you very much. And thank you for bringing a very nice ending to the show and indirectly answered what organizations can do. Thank you very much for talking about courage as an emotion which is an important energy, and what is the energy that we want to bring into life. And that is what our leaders in the month of May did when they gave voices to their people. They were very focused on regard for others. They had a very clear purpose on how to do that. They were focused on giving autonomy to their people, and they build their resilience for their people and for themselves, all because they were also emotionally aware. They had the self awareness about themselves, of who they are, who they are not, and that's why they're great leaders.
Yes.
And thank you again to Anima, Dr. Vicky, and to Sarah, who had said yes to our show for the month of May. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashok. That was such a lovely summary that you made. You're so good at it. But I still want to add on one thing that came up as you made the
I'll give
summary.
you 30 seconds.
Okay. I found all these leaders were great because they were okay to be imperfect.
They were okay to be imperfect, yes.
And I think it is because they were okay to be imperfect, but really be great at what they do, is why they were also open to bending structures. Because people who are stuck with perfection can't bend structures.
That's
And
right.
I think for us to be okay to be imperfect, we need to be very, very grounded
Yeah.
individuals. And grounded individuals make great leaders. So that's my more than 30 second. So thank you, Ashok. Thank you,
Thank you.
Sherry, Dr. Vicky, Anima, and Mel, who joined us just now. And did I miss anybody? Mel and Gerald. So with that, thank you very much. Next week, we will meet you with a new guest. And I hope
Yes.
this summary was useful. Tell us.
Yes, Sherry says that. She says she's loving the series.
All right. Thank you, Sherry, for encouraging us. With that, this is Mother signing off from Malaysia. Good night.
And Ashok from Singapore. Bye bye, and see you all next week.